go. This is episode 2 of the Cop Cave. I'm gonna find a way to get us some fake applause and make it show introduction again. I am Tyron Smells Good Woods, brought to you by the one and only Master Police Officer Stanley Woods in the building. How are you feeling today, Dad?
All right, I'm feeling pretty good.
Nice, nice. I want to first of all address the background because everybody wanted to call me up and be like, "Hey, what's going on with the background? You got to get up off the floor." So we have upgraded, and it's going to continue doing this. Your background does have me beat though. This is like part of the inspiration for the Cop Cave. Your little setup going on.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a nice little space here. It's a nice little cave.
Okay. And we've been toying with like the actual setup, so you don't have to give us a full tour yet. But right now you got your uniform behind you with the flag and then a shadow box to your right, I believe, over there.
Correct.
Are those medals or what are they kind of representing,
Well, the shadow box is kind of covers your career, so it's different positions that I've held, different badges that I've had, and any awards that I've received. So you'll see the ribbons there are awards that I received, and also different units I've been a part of. Like I was part of the homicide squad, so I got a homicide patch in there. Hostage negotiator, so that patch is in there. Instructor, so that patch is in there as well. So it just kind of chronicles uh, your career into one grouping.
Very cool. And that kind of leads us into today's story, which involves a bit of homicide and hostage taking. And this is going to be like the first time we really break down a case. So I'm excited to go into what I think we should call like the card game, because that's kind
Okay.
of this case revolves around. So before we get into it, because like you said over the phone, this is like a kind of jump around story. There's different parts. You kind of got to understand the relationships between people. So let's start with that first W and go over the who involved. So can you give like a little background of like what this card game is, like where it was going on and who's was throwing it?
Yeah, the card game was hosted by a young lady who uh, invited her friends and acquaintances to come over to play cards. And from what I understand, there was probably 12 or 15 players that night. And our victim was one of the players in the card game. He On that particular night he was not playing well. He was losing, so and he had to ask his girlfriend who was there with him to get his ATM to go get him some more money so he can stay in the game.
Right.
And that kind of was the impetus of how this started from the card game. Basically, when I got the call, well, I got the call much later than that, but from what I was told from the victims and the witnesses, how this all started, my primary victim was losing at the card game, so he asked his girlfriend to go out to the ATM to get him more money so he could stay in the game and continue playing. Uh, at the same time, there was another person in the car at the house who wasn't playing but wanted to stay. However, his friend that was with him convinced him not to stay, and they left shortly before the girlfriend was to leave to go get the money.
All right,
So
so
this,
just to give an idea of who's playing, Jason, let's just call him Jason, is the guy who's losing money. And Jason's girlfriend, I wrote this down, we'll call her Lisa.
okay,
Jason sends Lisa to go get Jason some money so he can stay in the game, right?
correct.
And who is the gentleman that convinced somebody else to stay? Who was that?
I don't recall the person's name, but he was someone that was visiting the house and
Hmm.
he wanted to stay, but his lady friend with him convinced him not to stay and to spend time with her. And that's
Okay.
why he left. He left just prior to what you're calling Lisa to go get the money.
Right.
So when this guy leaves with his girlfriend, as they're driving away, he looks directly across the street from where they're playing cards. He sees these two guys hiding behind bushes, putting a mask over their head. So he thinks right away they're getting ready to rob the card game. Now,
Right.
this is a time before everybody had cell phones, so he didn't have a cell phone. They drove to the nearest payphone. I know your generation don't know much about a payphone,
What is it?
but
We
they
don't
drove to the nearest payphone, which was about a block away. And he called the house to the main person who owned the house and told him, "Hey, y'all about to get robbed, so y'all need to break the game up, call the police, or whatever." So she believed him, and she told the rest of the people there, and she called the police.
Hmm.
So the police are on their way. The card game's breaking up because all the players are like, man, they don't want to get robbed, but they're still in the house from what I gather. But what happened in the meantime, after he's at the payphone calling, the girlfriend who you're calling Lisa, she comes out to her car, or to actually her boyfriend's car, to go to get the money.
Right.
And as she's coming out, the robbers are coming across the street, and they see her about to get into the car. It was an Infinity, which was a pretty nice car back then. They were had just come out. This is the late '90s.
Hmm.
And so as she's getting in the car, they carjack her. They decide to carjack her instead of going into the house to do the robbery.
Okay, so this is where things kind of get weird because the bandit, we can call them the sticky bandits, they had originally planned to rob the card game. Do you know if they had any motivation to rob the card game? Because they obviously like knew it was going on.
Right. They knew it was a card game. They thought it was a high stakes card game, but also the primary bandit knew the host from the time before he was. He had recently got out of prison, like within the last month or two,
Hmm.
and he was in prison for a few years. And the host of the card game was the girlfriend of a big time drug dealer at that time, who he worked for, and that drug dealer was now in prison as well. So this guy's out, and he's thinking she still has all the money that he made over the years. So he wants her to give him money.
So
And
before he went to jail, the lady that was hosting the card game had like all these high rollers that would come into the card games just because of association. So he gets out thinking, I got to do something. I got to get my money up. Let me go ahead and rob Mona and then try to like hit a lick. And then he comes across Lisa at the Infinity and just jumps ship and kind of like says, we'll do this instead and see if they can get money out of her. Is that where we're at?
yeah, that's kind of where he at. Because from what I found out later, he approached the woman who hosted the game like a week or so before, asking her for money that he thought, his former boss, her boyfriend who was in prison, he thought he deserved some money. And she told him she didn't have any money. They had spent all the money on lawyers and all that stuff,
Right.
but he didn't believe her. So that's why he think, okay, when he heard about the card game, we'll rob the card game and I'll make her give me the money. So that was his motivation from her standpoint.
Okay.
But as they cross the street to go in to rob the house, they see the young lady coming out, getting into the Infinity. They decide to carjack her because it's a nice car. They think she must have money,
Right.
so they carjack her, put her in the car, and they get in and they drive away. They actually drive to the ATM. She's freaking panicking and she can't remember the PIN number. So she's all panicked, can't remember the PIN number, and so they decide not to deal with the ATM. They ask her to take it to her house so they can get something from her house. Well, they do go to her house, but she doesn't have any money. She lives in a little bitty apartment. Doesn't really have anything. She was there with her boyfriend who was playing. It was his car.
Right.
Now, while all that is going on, police come. They check the area. They don't find anybody. Game breaks up. Everybody leaves except for the guy who owns the Infinity.
Jason.
Yeah. So the guy you calling Jason, he's the only one left. Him and the host.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's outside waiting for his car, thinking, "Hey, what's taking her so long?" Because it's been about 30 minutes goes by, and she hasn't returned. So he's really upset. And then he finally sees the car pull up, the green Infinity pull up, and it's a guy driving it. So now he's like, "What the hell's going on?" So he walked up to the car and see this guy driving it. The passenger, the other guy gets out, the other bad guy, and points a gun to his head, and makes him get in the car. So now they carjacking him as well. They go back to the bank ATM.
Right. Technically, two kidnappings at this point.
Correct, and carjacking.
And this is
So
their third rob attempt. They were going for the card game, skipped out on that, tried to carjack this woman. She couldn't get them anything. Now they're on their third person, still just trying to get some money. So they're 0 for 3 just to start off
yeah,
this game.
yeah, you can put it that way. So they go back to the ATM and they get the owner of the car with his ATM card, try to make him get money out of there. Well, he tells me when we get to the interview process that he intentionally put in the wrong PIN number, and he did it several times. The machine ate his card. So
Mm.
now they're really pissed because he said they were punching him, they were hitting him, but he said I intentionally put in the wrong one because I didn't want to give him any money. And so now the machine eats the card. The bad guys are really pissed. So they smacking him again, and pistol whipping him. And now they say, okay, we're gonna go back to her house and kill him.
Wow.
That's what the bad guy said. That was their intent. So they're driving back to her place. On the way there, they see somebody selling drugs on a particular corner in another area, and they decide, you know what? He always has money. Let's rob him.
These are very persistent bandits, you know. Like,
yeah,
I
yeah.
think the lesson that can be learned from this is if you at first you don't succeed, try to rob somebody else. If they don't give you any money, go back, kidnap their boyfriend, and just keep trying, keep trying. So now they're at the point where they're just finding not anybody on the street, but like some random drug dealer that they had dealt with in the past, and they're trying to rob him, thinking he's going to have some cash on him.
Exactly.
And they've already
So
kidnapped 2 people and stolen the car at this point, so they're really in it.
right, and this is where it actually gets funny. Okay, so they go behind a convenience store to try to plot this out, and they're gonna get the girl to go pretend she's gonna buy some drugs from the guy, so they can sneak up on him and rob him. Well, she's not a drug addict. She
Right.
doesn't know how to play, and she's already nervous because she thinks she's about to be murdered. Okay, so they're trying to explain to her what to say and what to do when you approach them if you're going to buy drugs. And she's telling, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And make it even worse, they don't. The victims don't have any money because he lost his at the card game, and the young lady didn't have any. So the bad guys are going in their pockets, pulling out cash to give to the girl to go and make it look like it's a drug deal.
There's a
And
whole
so
new meaning to the phrase "crime pays," am I right?
oh yeah, they were hoping it pays, but it didn't. So we got the primary bad guys in the back seat behind the passenger.
So
We
Jason's
got
driving. Lisa is about to go buy drugs from this dealer.
that's the plan. She's sitting in the front passenger seat. You
Mhm.
have the other bad guy in the driver's seat, and you have the victim, male victim, behind the driver. Okay, and all the while they're wearing a little ski mask, this homemade ski mask and gloves and such. So the victims can't see their face, just see their eyes with their eye holes that they cut out. So the guy in the back seat and the guy in the front seat are both trying to tell the girl what to say, what to do. The guy in the back seat puts his gun down on the seat between him and the victim, leans forward to explain to the girl exactly what he wants her to do. The victim says he sees an opportunity, grabs the gun, put it to the head of the driver. And he says to the other guy, let us go or I'm going to shoot him. And he said it was like a pregnant pause for a few seconds. Then the guy punched him and he pulled the trigger.
Hmm.
So the driver, bad guys, dead, shot in the head.
Yeah.
Okay, now the two in the back, the victim and the primary bad guy are fighting over the gun. And the victim said he still had his finger on the trigger, so he kept pulling the trigger until he heard click, click, click. Then he let the gun go. Him and the girl gets out of the car and they go to run away. And the victim's telling me this. He said it happened like in the movies. He gets out of the car, he goes to run, he trips and falls.
Of course.
And then the bad guy comes behind him with the gun, stands over him, puts the gun out, and click, click, gun's empty. So the victim is able to get up, get away, run inside the convenience store. Bad guy gets in the car, pushes his dead friend over to the passenger seat, drives away.
Hmm.
Okay. And we find out later on that the bad guy ended up dumping the body on the side of the road a few miles away. And he drove the car down to another city about 15 miles away and abandoned the car. The victims go in the store, get the store clerk to call the police. And it was another jurisdiction. So this other agency comes in and they get the story from them. And once they realize it occurred in our jurisdiction, that's when I got called in to work the case.
So are you getting called out like the same night, like after all this has gone down, and then you have to
On
kind of
this same night, I think I was working. I think I was on the night shift that night because I think this all happened before midnight. So I was still at work. But when the other agency realized where it started from, they said, "Hey, this is going to be your case." So they brought the victims to the police station, and that's where I got the beginning of the story.
okay. So you're pretty much like your starting of the case was talking to the victims and finding out what happened with them. How after that, where do you go? What's the next step? Are you trying to recover the car, or are you going back to
Right.
the drug gang?
Well, I got all the information from the victims, and that's how it started. And I think early the next morning, the body was recovered,
Mhm.
discovered, I should say. I think it was a fisherman that saw it because it was near a canal.
Yeah, like in
And
you when they're just walking around like moving boxes and stuff. It's like, oh, what's
I don't know exactly how that person found it, but they found the body. We reported the car stolen, and it was found in another city the next day as well. So that's how we kind of put all that together. Uh, a part of the story that was interesting that I found out a couple of days later, when they were planning this robbery. Initially, there was four people in the car as they were discussing and planning this robbery. Because the primary bad guy, like I said, he just got out of prison maybe a month or so. He was talking to the secondary bad guy, whose uncle, who's of diminished mental capacity, was in the car with him. And they had another friend who was with him as they're driving around discussing how to do this robbery.
Hmm.
And that later on came to be a good part of the story that helped corroborate it for me, talking to the uncle and talking to the other friend. Well, they didn't want the uncle, because of his mental state, to be involved in the actual robbery. So after they went to the store, bought the gloves, discussed it, bought the hoods, and cut the eye holes out, the uncle is there for all of this. They took him back home and made him stay there because they
Hmm.
didn't want him to be involved in it. So the three of them, the driver and the two bad guys who were actually going to the robbery, they come. The driver drops him off a couple of blocks away, and he goes to another address where he's going to pick them up later on. They were going to meet him there.
Hmm.
But what happened after he dropped them off? He's driving to another location. He gets stopped for speeding, and he has a suspended license, so he gets arrested. Okay, so their ride that was supposed to pick him up is now in jail. Okay, and while he's in jail, being arrested for the suspended license, he hears on the news his friend is dead. And he knew that they had planned on doing that robbery. And he's thinking that the other guy, because he didn't trust the other guy, caused this friend to be dead, which technically is true, but he thought he might have killed him himself.
He thought,
So, say again?
he thought it was like foul play or something. Like he tried to get one over on him.
Yeah, he thought the primary bad guy murdered his friend for whatever reason. So that's why after he got out of jail, he came to me to
Hmm.
tell me, hey, I was in the car. This is what they were planning. This is what was part of the plan. And that's how we got the story of how everything came together. And he said that he gave me the identity of the primary bad guy. So now I knew who I was looking for. Okay, because the victims never saw the faces because they were wearing the ski mask the whole time. So the victims never saw their faces. Uh, and so when we got this guy out of jail, when he got out of jail and came to me to say, this is what happened, I think this bad guy killed my friend. Okay. And that's why he came forward and told the story of what happened. Then I talked to the deceased bad guy's family, talked to the uncle corroborated what happened. That yeah, I was in the car with him, and I saw him cut the eye holes out. I knew he was getting ready to go do a robbery. And they all thought that the other bad guy is the one that did it.
Right.
They were thinking, because he was known as a bad guy. Recently out of prison, had a reputation, so everybody was thinking he just killed this kid. But the other guy was pretty young. I think he was like 22 years old.
And maybe they
Um,
think the main guy was like trying to take all the money that they could have got or whatever. Maybe it was
yeah,
just something.
and he was just a bad guy. So they all thought that he just had this, that he did the murder. Uh, so once I got enough information on that, I was able to put the case together to charge the primary bad guy with conspiracy to commit robbery and felony murder,
Mm.
and the kidnapping and all that stuff. So I did probable cause, and probable cause is it's the arrest affidavit that you officer has to complete with all the facts uh, of the crime and of the suspect, so you can arrest them. And typically, probable cause are pretty short and succinct. But
Mhm.
in this case, because of all the details that were going on, it was like a 2.5-page probable cause, which is unusual.
Right.
Most probable causes are like a page, if that much. But because of all the things that went on in this case, uh, That was the longest probable cause I ever wrote. Okay, so uh, the primary bad guy actually came in when he saw on the news. Um, he came to talk to us one time before we went to his house. He came in to say he had nothing to do with it. Everybody on the street was saying he killed this kid, and
Mhm.
that's why he was saying I didn't kill nobody. I don't know what they're talking about. I just want to clear my name. He actually came in and said that. So
Right.
we made sure we had a good. We got DNA from him and all that stuff. And
Did
then
he
once I got
being there for the robbery?
no, he just said he didn't do the killing. He said I was nowhere involved.
Okay.
Okay, he denied being in the car, denied all of that stuff. He just said the word on the street is I killed this kid. I didn't do it. So that's what he came to put his name back.
Then he gave consent to like take DNA at that point after because he voluntarily comes to talk to you at this point. Just
Just
interesting.
yeah, because he thought, okay, I can clear my name if I just come there and tell them I ain't had nothing to do with that. I hear what people on the street saying, and they ain't had nothing to do with it.
But you
Okay,
still, like, as a detective, you still have to look into it. So
of
you,
course,
because I'm sure he obviously didn't have like a alibi or that you could like corroborate or anything.
exactly. No alibi. He just I don't even remember what he said. What did, but I know he denied being a part of in the car, all that stuff. He
Mm.
just said people on the street are saying I killed this kid. I just want y'all to know I didn't kill him.
Yeah.
And that was basically what he was saying.
This
So
one thing I see that's interesting about this case is like how everybody is involved and somewhat has like a relationship through one way or another. Um, Going back to like the card game itself, I know you mentioned that the host had like dealings with people that were like in the streets, like selling drugs or whatever. Did you end up talking to her about what happened, or how did she play into this in a bigger part?
yeah, she when I went back to talk to her to ask about the game, and that's when she told me the story about this other guy thinking she had money, that he came in and asked her about the money. And she told me that the money was all spent. They spent it all on lawyers before her boyfriend went to prison. So, and she was a bit scared of the guy. She was nervous that he might try to do something to her after he came and asked her about the money. But she still did the card game because that was something they regularly did. So she didn't let that deter her from having the card game. But she she never saw the bad guy, so she couldn't say that he was the one that did it. But she said I wouldn't put it past him because of his reputation.
Right. And she
So,
had just come asking for money. Had you dealt with her before?
oh yeah,
Mm.
on a few occasions. As a matter of fact, it's interesting that she. This is years later, but remember I talked about my first night on the job and the young lady who shot the guy.
Mhm.
That's what this lady.
Wow. So that
So
just goes to prove that, like, as big a city as West Palm is in Palm Beach County, is like everybody's still kind of interconnected, and you run into the same people doing the working the same beat. You know,
yeah,
this
and and this case is not done because I mean you asked about her relationship with me, and even the victim in this, the one who actually the male victim,
Mhm.
I knew him prior because he used to work at a police station
Hmm.
as a civilian employee.
Okay.
But at that time he was no longer working at the police station. He had a different career. But that was interesting. So I when I saw him that night, I was like, oh, I know this guy. Okay. But he was the victim in this case. And I mean he wasn't criminal, but he liked to gamble. You know, he liked playing cards. Uh, he likes to gamble. So that's why he was involved with this particular person uh, in the group. Because I don't know all the people that were at the card game, but I'm sure some of them probably were criminals. Okay, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. But I only talked to the victim and the guy who called it in and the host. Those are only people at the game that I actually talked to about what happened.
Mm.
But after we finally make the arrest, I get the PC completed. We get the SWAT team to go search warrant and make the arrest.
Mm.
So he's in jail. The primary bad guy's in jail. The family of the victims, of the victim who died, they're satisfied that he's in jail. It's all on the news. But my primary victim, he calls me after seeing it on the news that I arrested this guy, and he said, "I think you arrested the wrong person." I'm like,
Mm.
what do you mean? I said, we got enough corroborating evidence and statements from, you know, the friend of the dead guy and the uncle of the dead guy who puts this guy as the one that was with him. Okay, I think we got a good enough case. No, I think that's the wrong guy. He ain't. His exact words were, this victim's words were, he's not ugly enough. I'm like, what do you mean?
Keep in mind they had on mask, as the kids would call it,
And
shiesty.
that's,
It's just the eyes showing.
yeah, he had a knit cap pulled all the way down with just the eye holes cut out. And I'm like, I thought you never saw his face. What do you mean he's not ugly enough? Oh no, I didn't see his face, but no, that guy there is not ugly enough. That's not the wrong guy, because the way the ski mask fit over his face, I can tell, his facial features, and that's not the right guy.
Mm.
And I try to convince him, hey, trust me, this is the guy. This is the right guy. We got a good PC. He's in jail. That's it. But
Yeah.
he was convinced that that wasn't the right guy. He said, I don't want the wrong person to go to jail. And he had a vision in his mind of there's a family in our city that was pretty notorious for committing crimes. He thought it was one of those people in that family. But I can try to tell him, no, from all the evidence that we have, this is the guy. But my victim decided to contact the state attorney, the local state attorney who was prosecuting the case, and tell him that he don't think we got the right guy.
Wow.
And he asked the state attorney if they could do a lineup. I'm like, how are we going to do a lineup? You never saw his face, because we can do a picture lineup or a live lineup. Well, I know his voice. Yeah. But he and the girlfriend both said, we recognize his voice, because all the stuff he said to us, we'll recognize his voice. So we're going to do a voice lineup. I'm like, voice lineup? I mean, I'm a detective. I've never heard of a freaking voice lineup. We don't do voice lineup because there's just so much that can go wrong. And I tried to, and the state attorney called me and asked if we can do this. I'm like, this is the right guy. We don't need to do this. This is a good case. You're messing it up. He said, well, this victim is adamant that he don't think this is the right guy. But I said he never saw his face, and he's convinced that this guy's not ugly enough for the person he saw with a ski mask on. I'm telling the state attorney this. They said, well, let's put together a voice lineup. So we never did a freaking voice lineup. How are we gonna put together a voice lineup? He said, try to make it happen. We'll go to the jail. We'll get a couple of inmates and a couple of deputies. We'll put out a script, have them all read it, and let our victims identify. I couldn't believe it, and I talked to my supervisors, and they were like, "Hey, the state attorney wants to do it, do it." Right. So I arranged, and we went over to the jail. We got a couple of deputies who were working, a primary the arrestee, and a couple of other people that were in jail that volunteered to read these scripts. They read them, had my victims listen to them. They picked the wrong person.
Mm.
Both victims picked the wrong person.
Did they pick like the same wrong person, or?
No, they picked different. One of them picked the deputy, one of them picked another inmate that wasn't the guy that I arrested. So, state attorney said, well, shoot, they didn't identify him, so we got to let him go.
But so you had all the evidence, and they still had he been like well, he'd been processed, like obviously in jail, but had he like gone to trial and everything?
No, this is before trial.
Pre-trial, but that's inconclusive evidence on the victim's part. One of them picked the deputy, and one of them picked somebody that was already in prison.
Exactly. It did not pick, neither one of them picked the person who was arrested. So the state attorney decided, well, we can't go forward. They can't identify the suspect. They decided not to go forward with the case.
That's not a great amount of evidence to overturn it.
Well, that's what happened. And then after that, the victim comes to me a couple of days later, and he's afraid that now this guy's going to be out, and the victim's family knows that he's the one that pulled the trigger. They're gonna try to do something to him. So now we had to put them in witness protection. We had to put him in witness protection, he and the girlfriend, because they were so terrified that this guy, once he got out of jail, was going to come looking for him and kill him. even though they couldn't identify him, but they were worried. So we did a witness protection for them for a few, oh, I think it was maybe a couple of weeks, and eventually the girlfriend moved out of the area.
Mm.
But the primary victim, he's still here, and I see him on occasion. He's still here, and I think the bad guy, if I'm not mistaken, I think he passed away. Yeah, I heard rumors that he died from AIDS.
Oh wow, man. And Craig was getting people left and right in the back in the day.
Yeah, yeah, that was supposedly the rumor that when he got out of prison, he was already HIV positive, and then after this incident happened, I heard on the street that he died. But I just thought it was an interesting case, and the way it turned out was disappointing. I wanted to see that go to trial and see uh, how that would have been prosecuted under those circumstances with those victims. I mean, they can they can testify to being the victim of the robbery. They never saw the face, and it's not necessary to see the face because we had enough uh, corroborated stories from the other people involved, from the
Right.
uncle of the person who was deceased, from the friend of the person who was deceased, who can put the guy I arrested in the car talking about committing this robbery.
Now you mentioned that the guy that eventually got arrested, he came to kind of clear his name. When he was like speaking with you, did you get DNA or anything like that? Was that something that went into the case?
Yeah, we did get DNA, but I don't recall if it ever was used because once they misidentified him, they just threw the case out.
Yeah.
So I mean, because they were wearing gloves and they were wearing the ski mask in the car, so wouldn't have been much DNA in there anyway, unless we recovered those items. And I don't remember if we ever recovered the ski mask from the second bad guy. Obviously, got out the dead guy, but not the other second.
But, like him being like right in the car next to him, if you were to recover the clothes he was wearing, it might have had like some blood from the victim or something on it.
Yeah, it should have because he actually pushed the victim out of the driver's seat into the passenger seat. So he probably did have some blood on his clothing. But again, when that happened, it was probably maybe a week or so before we actually knew
Arrested.
who he was and made contact with him.
So those clothes could be burnt or
Yeah, yeah. I don't know what happened to those clothes. Uh, yeah, we didn't do anything with the clothes because it was at least a week after the actual killing that we actually found out who this person was. Because remember, they dumped the body, dumped the car. Their friend was in jail. He was in jail for a couple of days before he came and got with me before we got information. So yeah, it was a week or so before I found out who this person was.
now this doesn't have to do with the case, but in the event that you get your car stolen and it's involved in a homicide or a murder like this, do you get the car back as the victim?
Yeah, yeah. Once we're done processing the car and getting as much evidence out of it as possible, yeah, you get it back. But in this case, the car is full of blood. You probably don't want it
I was about to say, do you do like a courtesy detailing or you just get it back as is?
as is. Okay. And in this particular case, I think I remember him saying and he reported to his insurance company and they I don't know if they totaled it or what, but he didn't want the car back.
Yeah, that makes sense. That definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
Interesting. And this all happened in West Palm Beach, like with people that
Yeah,
you've interacted with on multiple occasions. That's something I find wild.
yeah, yeah. I mean, West Palm is, a city of what, about 150,000 now, and back then we were probably just under 100,000 people. So, I mean, it's not a small town, but it's not super large. So people who run in certain areas, kind of see each other all the time. And as a police officer, you run into some of the same people all the time.
Well, this is a compelling story, man. Is
Yeah,
there any other notes or I can't think of any other questions I have for this case specifically. I know like we'll get into some deeper stuff going into like the other episodes, but this was the card game so far.
yeah. The card game definitely was the impetus of this, but that robbery and that misidentification makes this case really unique, and especially dealing with all the people I had to talk to to corroborate, to get enough evidence to actually arrest a person. That's what made it, from my aspect as a detective, an interesting case and good work to do this. So it was good work on that. This is a case I'll never forget because of all the details that's involved in it. It's something that stuck in my mind from day one.
It's a lot of turns, man. It's a lot of turns and like unsuccessful runs and kind of
Yeah,
bad luck, kind of just poor decisions, man. Wrong place, wrong time for some people. But
yeah, and that was something and I always call them like the Keystone Criminals, the way they were giving money to the girl to try to get her to buy drugs. I thought that was hilarious when I learned that they were trying to give her money and trying to tell her what to say as she approach a drug dealer so they don't get suspicious so they can rob her. I'm like, wow, that was just something. But the people involved were not the brightest folks. Okay.
mm. Well, I think I've got a lot to eat here. I feel like this was a good, solid episode. I want to thank you, Dad, for sharing this case with us and everybody tuning in to the second episode of the Cobb Cave.